Let me know if you see the little record button thing going on. Little
It's
thing.
there.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back, Joseph Coates, my man. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Doing well. On
uh,
Valentine's
real
Day
quick,
Eve.
do you still agree to the consent and release of this podcast?
Yes.
Awesome. So I want to get that out of the way. So I'm sorry. I asked you a question and then I cut you off. How are you doing?
No, you're fine.
Obviously, I'm not a professional at what I do.
No, this is fun to have conversations with people about different subjects. So I'm more than happy to do this.
Yeah, people always ask me what my podcast is about. I'm having conversations, man. That's
Yeah.
if you go to my YouTube channel, it's Blanco's Conversations. That's all it is. It's good conversation. I think good conversations will always sell, no matter what. People are always
It's
interested
a
in
it's
that.
a it's a popular format. It's the two guys talking format of podcasting, whether two guys, two gals, one or the other, whatever.
Yeah.
It's one of the bigger ones. So yeah, you're on to gold here with your
Yes,
diversity. So
I'm gonna be the next Kardashian. I'm gonna be
that's,
billionaire.
that's it.
All right, man. So let me explain to the listeners what we're doing.
Sure.
Joey here loves history. I love history too. He loves it a lot more than me. So what we decided to do, we kind of collaborated on this, and Hamilton's a big thing right now. Uh, I'm in the military. He's a veteran as well, and we thought about American history, and I thought the five most pivotal points. I mean, this is arbitrary, it's kind of random, but I picked five, he picked five. And what we're going to do is flip this here corner. And Joey, I'm going to let you pick first. And if Joey wins, he could pick one of my five, or I could pick one of his five. Actually, I got to look up your five real quick. I have it here on the screen. Here we go. Bam. I got it.
Got it.
You ready to go, Joe? Heads or
Ready.
tails? What do you got?
Let's do tails.
I can't see it. Tails. Go ahead.
Fantastic. So let's if I'm getting a pick, let's start with the very beginning. Well, not quite the very beginning, but let's go with the Declaration of Independence. That was one
That's
of yours.
one of mine, yes.
That's one of yours, yeah.
So the reason why I picked the Declaration of Independence, again, I'm not a history guy here. As far as I understand, America is probably the only country founded on ideals. Every other country, some guy took it over by might, and then later said that, well, God wanted me to rule this country or whatever, whatever it is. But so I think that's sort of like when we talk about the Statue of Liberty or United States being a beacon for the rest of the world. It starts, I think, right there with Thomas Jefferson saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right?
Right.
In nature's laws, God's, all that stuff like that he said in the Declaration. Who else? What other country? I mean, if you know of another country that's founded on those principles, I can't think of one.
Right. Most of the countries of the past had, they were monarchies of some type.
Right.
The only thing that came close before the Constitution was in, I think, the 1285. The date's probably wrong. It was in the 1200s. But the Magna Carta,
Okay.
which limited the power of King John II,
Okay.
who was the one who was in Robin Hood. Remember?
Okay.
Richard went off to go on crusade, and John stayed behind and ran the country. Well, he was quite the tyrant, and they had all these. Basically, the aristocracy was like, "We got to rein in on it," and
Right.
the Magna Carta was formed. Now, that was sort of that was a bit of that was a document that he didn't necessarily had to follow, but he knew that if he didn't follow it, he'd be in a lot of trouble. And since then, I think about 5 years ago, the last part of the Magna Carta was actually gotten rid of. So, although it's a historical document, none of it's actually still active. There is a copy of and actually, I will say that the Magna Carta was so important as a template for the founding fathers that there's a copy of the Magna Carta with the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the
Wow.
Constitution.
Did
In
not know that.
yeah, so it was a big deal back then. And I think one of the things that we want to keep in mind with the Declaration of Independence, when they did this, they were fighting the largest empire in the world.
Yeah.
And by putting their name on it was truly a profile in courage, because they were then committing treason and sedition.
Kind
It
of
was,
signing their own death sentence in a way. I think is the way I
yeah,
heard it described. Yeah.
yeah. Had they lost, they would have been in big trouble. They got lucky.
I was just playing, guys. It was a joke.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was saying. I didn't read it at all.
Yeah, some guy wrote this for me and just told me to sign it. But yeah, so I think that I think when you look at the Declaration of Independence, it really shows the courage that people had, and the ideas were kind of floating around at the time. You know, the Enlightenment period. So a lot of places sort of had these ideas in mind. France, who was an ally of ours, who actually we probably wouldn't have won if it weren't for France, really helped to kind of cement that. And yeah, it was a good choice though.
Yeah. It's a foundation, and I love it. It's a principle that I whenever I read, every once in a while I'll just read certain things that just stick to me, like just gets to me. And I feel like a lot of Americans today, because I don't know, man, we're not that bright. I'm sorry if I offend anybody. We're not that bright as a country. We talked a little bit about this on the last podcast. And some of that is our own fault, and some of that is our fault that the teaching system, education system isn't the greatest. But we live in the information age, so really, you know what, there's no excuse. If you're curious about something, you can go and find the answers about it.
Get a hold of your local congressman. They will send you for free a Bill of Rights, a Constitution, and a Declaration of Independence.
Assuming that your congressman knows what those things are, what they even say.
Yeah, we kind of ran. Today, I think today is a good day to talk about profiles in courage, if you will. It seems like there isn't too much courage going around at this.
Who's that batshit crazy congresswoman? Not to get off topic, but she was like aliens, the Jews. I was like, Jesus Christ.
The Jewish space lasers. And yeah, it's basically the female version of Alex Jones.
Yeah.
In one office. And that, and I actually have a friend of mine who is in her district.
Oh, fuck.
And, I mean, he's a very good friend, very nice guy. But he's like, what in the hell, guys? What did you do?
Yeah.
I would even, I don't know for sure, but I would still say that he's still a sort of a conservative along the lines, the William F. Buckley, George
more
Will
classic.
And he's like,
not batshit crazy, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Smaller government, have less regulation, less
taxes,
those kind of things. Yeah.
Which who's against? I'm not against that. You know what I mean? Who's
right?
Come on.
All right. That's the ultimate conundrum of being liberal when you're like, oh, let's raise our own taxes. You're like, oh crap.
I don't mind raising taxes and paying for stuff. I want to make sure it's going to the right places and not these guys, getting like $100,000, $200,000 to do some bullshit ass job somewhere. Like it's meaningless. Like, fuck you. That's fraud, dude. All right, Joey, since you won, you get to choose again. Heads or tails?
Oh, you know what? Let's go. Let's move right into the Constitution. I think
you got to win the flip though.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You get the flip again. Yeah. It's heads or tails.
Let's do tails again.
All right, worked for you last time. Oh, it's heads. My go.
Oh, perfect.
Nice. All right, let me go ahead and look at what you got here real quick. Because I don't know anything about it, let's go to the election of 1876.
Okay, so this is the Tilden Hayes election. So Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden were the two presidential candidates. And it was a super close election, and the Electoral College was really close. There were questions on whether certain people that had voted in the Electoral College were even eligible because they had government jobs. And the results of this election went on, I think it was a month, maybe 2 months. So you have to remember at the time, voters were different. Women couldn't vote,
Right.
blacks couldn't vote. We didn't have many minorities in the country, or
Right.
minorities, whatever. Um, the way the president was chosen was like, I think this was still at the time when senators were appointed. So there was and you had that lame duck period. So, we have the election in November, and then the president takes over in January. Back then the election was in November, and the president took over in March. So
Oh,
they had a
wow.
lot of
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
really just mess around with this. And basically what ended up happening was Hayes lost the popular vote. So this was the first time that somebody lost the popular vote but won the electoral college.
Oh, okay. That's the very first time. All right.
So the compromise of 1877 was where the Democrats conceded the election to Hayes in return for an end to Reconstruction and withdrawal of the federal troops from the South. So at this time, the federal troops were still in the South. It was during Reconstruction. You had carpetbagger. You were trying to rebuild the South.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this, when we talk about LBJ later on, will make more sense. At the time, the Republican Party stood for equal rights, and the Democrats were primarily in the South and preferred subjugation of former slaves. So what ended up happening was Hayes got the election for certain circumstances. So basically, the Republicans at the time kind of sold out the South, or sold out former slaves. So what it did was troops were recalled from State House property.
I see.
Funds were provided to build railroads. You had some cabinet positions that were, give Southerners, because, at the time, I don't know if they had fully pardoned Southern troops yet.
Oh, okay.
So then there were funding was going to go to rebuild the South, the economy of the South. But the last part of it is the biggest kick in the ass for the whole thing. And this is when you hear people today talking about how the Confederacy was for states' rights and this whole states' rights thing.
Okay.
So Hayes gets the election, federal government withdraws from the South, and the solution to the race problem was to say, okay, well, we'll let the states manage equal rights. So if you do the math between 1876, the election of 1876, and the Civil Rights Act of 1965, you have a huge.
This is Jim Crow, basically.
Jim Crow. This is all Jim Crow.
Yeah.
So basically, to win the presidency, they sold out the former slaves, which led to almost basically another 100 years of slavery oppression, in reality.
Fuck. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that, Joey.
Yeah. To me, this is, there's a few events in American history to me that are really kind of talk about how we became who we are. This election right here, to me, is like one of those, not unknown, people know about it.
Yeah.
One of those
not known well enough.
Yeah. Where you look and you go, oh man, we really fucked this one up. Like, that was a bad idea.
Yeah. And that's the problem with politics, I think, is that, your goal in government or as a politician should be the welfare, the best for your constituents, your country, your God, whatever, your family. But it's not. It becomes keeping your job or your party first, You hear that, which is why Trump, I think, was able to do what he did, because all the Republicans got in line, even though they hated his guts. They didn't want him to be a president. And even something like 2/3 of the people who voted for him didn't think he'd be a good president, but they voted for him anyway. It's like, really? That's patriotic. Thanks, guys. That's very American of you.
My wife and I were joking, probably around September, October. This was the first election that my wife and I donated money to. And both of us just had to shake our heads, and we thought, my God, out of all the people that I could picture myself donating money to win an election, I picked Joe Biden. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
really? This is the first.
Grandpa.
Yeah,
Grandpa.
I'm not
One foot
even.
in the home. He's got one foot in the elderly. Jesus Christ.
But part of it is like at least just an adult. Can we
Yeah.
have an
And I think
adult
that's why he
vote?
won. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
one.
Oh,
A
that's
lot of the
exactly.
other I saw, I think maybe one debate I saw. A lot of them were nice. They were young, but I didn't see them as presidential. They were
Yeah.
just missing something. He was the closest thing out of all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah. So this is and I think this kind of goes when you hit on something when you were talking about how we look at politics. Doing something for the better of the party. I'm not sure what either. Like, I'm not sure what they could have done
Right.
because with Hayes winning and turning the South over to states' rights was sort of dooming the former slaves to
Oppression,
Jim
right?
Crow
Yeah.
and to keep up the systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
Had Tilden won, he was kind of for the subjugation of blacks anyway. So like
So maybe the lesser of two
it
evils.
that compromise might have been the lesser of two evils. I'm not really sure, but
So there you go. And, that's another thing with politics. I think too is like sometimes we're a little too hard on them as well. So both things that I'm saying are true. Like this whole COVID thing. If you said, "Hey, shut everything down," they come at you like, "Oh, you asshole! You destroyed our economy, and we didn't have to
right,
do this." And if you leave
right.
everything open, they come at you with, "Oh, my grandma died, and this, and
Mm-hmm.
that. Why didn't you lie?" So you're gonna get it either way, man.
It's you have to kind of come up you have to kind of come up with a method where nobody is terribly happy but not terribly displeased
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
That's sort of you have to be kind of indifferent, which maybe that's why Joe Biden might be the perfect president because I think everybody who voted for him was fairly indifferent to him.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll help. I
It's
don't
like
know.
if he does something great, nice. If he doesn't, well, we weren't expecting much, Joe.
Oh, that's so sad, but true.
All right,
But true.
let's move on. So I won. My turn to choose. You
Yep.
said tails twice. I'm gonna go with heads. And heads. All right. So I'm gonna go with one of mine. I'm gonna go with
Yeah.
the Constitution. All right. So the reason why, kind of like what you're saying, you know, it kind of ties in with what you were saying because America's original sin is kind of race. It is race.
Yeah.
And in the Constitution, they had an opportunity to kind of sort of rectify that instead of pushing the ball down the road, and then Abraham Lincoln Civil War and everything because we didn't deal with it then. But that's not the reason why I picked the Constitution. I picked the Constitution because, for all intents and purposes, this dream of America should have failed. Historically speaking, looking at it, yeah, like you guys, if you saw Hamilton, the king says it, you'll be back because now you got to govern yourselves, assholes. You know what I mean? Who's gonna look out for you? Who's gonna take care of you? You know what I mean? And yeah, historically speaking, revolutions and stuff like that end really badly. And for some reason, and I think the Constitution is part of that we have this crazy thing of government where there's the Congress, but then there's a House, and then there's an executive, and then there's a just, and because it's so fucking maddening, it kind of works. Because
Mhm.
no one gets it, no one understands it. I think it kind of worked. You know what I mean?
It is a fantastic flawed document. It
Yes.
does give separation of powers. It does give um, certain inalienable rights. It does
Right.
have, there's a process to it. It's very idealistic, but it's also very flawed.
Yeah.
Um, and I think people tend to forget that the United States was not anything. We were a second class
Oh God. Yeah.
until World War II.
Yeah.
We were really lucky enough to have had the industrial base that was growing at the time
Hmm.
and just building war is really what created what we are now.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's a whole other subject too.
Oh boy, is it ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking through just a little bit, and I came across somebody had mentioned one of the things about the Constitution, that we are one of only three countries, or yeah, we're one of three countries to actually have the right to bear arms in our Constitution, and we have by far fewer rights in our Constitution than most other countries.
Mm.
So most countries have around 60 some rights that we have.
Well, their rights, so their Constitution came years later. Ours is what, 250 years old almost?
Yeah, they got a pretty decent template and ran with it. So, always plagiarize if you get the chance to plagiarize
Exactly.
a good idea.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of them did, but it is a complex system, and I wish our citizenry understood more of how it worked, just on a basic, and to go back to the current thing, the current election, Biden takes office, signs 30, 40 executive orders,
right off the back,
ramrod stuff through. I'm not a fan of executive orders. I never have been. To me, it's a workaround the constitutional process, the electoral process. But on the other hand, sometimes you got to get stuff done, and
exactly, yeah.
It is what it's a flawed system, and people think that certain people can do certain things, and you really can't. I wish more people understood how it actually worked.
Yeah. And it kills me when people call George Washington the first president of the United States. He's actually the first president of the United States under this Constitution. Yes. Because remember, we had like I guess a decade or something like that after we got our independence. And I forgot what that was called. We had some kind of bullshit ass framework of a federal government.
Yeah.
And I think they had like two or three presidents.
Articles of Confederation.
Something like that. Jesus.
Yeah.
The name is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. we had to we had a do-over. So we got a mulligan on that one, and the mulligan happened to work. So
could you tell me the names of the people who were president during that period? I have no idea.
No, I don't.
That's what I'm saying. Why is that?
It was a failed government.
We're America. We're winners. We don't talk about failures, huh?
Right. We never talk. We really have a tendency to not talk about the ugly things that we've done in the past, or even the things that don't promote American exceptionalism. You can't. I remember learning as an undergraduate about the Zoot Suit riots in Los Angeles. Oh, it was basically in Los Angeles.
I know what a Zoot Suit is. I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically the police were just out beating the shit out of like young Latino men. Because
things don't change, huh? Things don't ever change.
Yeah. And it was just, and you sit there and you're like, wait, what? Or you talk about the Japanese internment camps, and all the other things that we've done as a country, and you think, ooh, yeah.
Or Lincoln, he gets all this praise and everything, man, but he basically pissed and pooped all over the First Amendment during the Civil War.
Yeah.
The news people weren't allowed to report exactly what was going on out there.
Yeah. And he didn't really care much about whether slavery ended or not.
There's a big debate about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. He saw the greater good as being the country being back together. He didn't really care if the slaves were freed or not. It does kind of show a practical means, but and it shows that even our most revered leaders are flawed people with flawed thoughts and flawed ideas, and I hope we keep that in mind. It's not something we need to praise failure, but we need to be aware of it. We need to be aware of the fact that people fail and ideas fail, and keep going.
Failure is just an opportunity to grow and find a success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The way I see it. So real quick, man, I had a guest on yesterday. Maybe you could tell me. I've always heard this. I've never really found anything. Well, I haven't really looked that hard either. But in that period after the war, before we had the Constitution, we had what you said, the Articles of Confederacy.
Articles of Confederation, yeah.
Yeah, Confederation. Yeah. The rumor is that during that period, there was actually a lot of African Americans in government, and that actually one of those presidents might have been an African American, which is why people don't talk about that period. I'm not
That's
sure
a
if that's
possibility.
true.
I've heard that. I'd have to look into it. I do know that we did have a Native American vice president at one time.
Oh
It
wow.
sort of gets swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Vice president, cabinet member, something like that. But you have to realize that there were people. Well, actually, I've been working with a local group. There was a suffragette here in Northwest Indiana
Mhm.
named Naomi Anderson, and she was born in the 1840s, and she was born freed, and her family had never been slaves, and she spoke out against. She spoke for women's suffrage. She spoke against uh, racial issues, all that stuff. So we did have people in this country who were born as uh, free people in the North who had
Right.
never African Americans who had never dealt with slavery. So
Yeah.
it is a possibility, depending on where they were from, New York, New England,
Right.
Pennsylvania, that weren't.
And plus, that was a position that no one really wanted. It wasn't coveted,
Yeah.
from what I understand. You know what I mean?
Well, the office of the president wasn't even that big of a deal until later on in history.
Yeah. All right, Joey, it's my turn again. I'm going to go with heads one more time.
Sounds good.
And it is heads. But I'm going to defer to you, brother. I'm going to let you choose this time.
You know what? When I was looking at both of the things that we chose,
yeah,
I would really like for you to talk about Ali refusing to go to Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just that. Ali really, he sort of changed because, and it's funny that he gives credit to the guy that he got his whole shtick from, which is Gorgeous George. Just being that loud out front person. If you look at TV today, who's not loud? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who is not basically copying Ali? You know what I mean? And, what the guy went through, like, it was unheard of. You're denying to go to war. Joe Louis went to war. Joe DiMaggio went to war. Ted Williams went twice. Elvis Presley, it was so un-American to do what he did. And he was so vilified at the time. And he basically opened America's eyes that, you know what? You don't have to agree to go to this war. You don't want to go for whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not saying that because I have issues with that too. Being a patriot, being a veteran, I have conflicts, but I understand the reason why we pick these things is because they're pivotal moments, right? They sort of shaped our country. Mm-hmm. What has shaped it more than that period? The 60s, right? Ali's part of that. I mean, he was the greatest fight of all time, him and Joe Frazier, right? The fight of the century. He is involved in so many things, and he's a Black Muslim that people love. You know what I mean?
And just a trash talker, arrogant.
Yeah.
But he had the skill to back it up.
Yeah.
And I think him making a stand at that time, because you had what year did he do that?
63, maybe, I want to say.
Okay. So, because remember later on.
Oh, no, later, because the war starts in 68. So it has to be later. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wasn't it the 68 Olympics where you had the guys on the podium?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The Black Power, the whole like, why in the hell? And, and this leads back to, we could go all the way back to the election of 1877, which is why I love history.
Yeah. He's from the South. He's from Jim Crow. Yeah.
Yeah, he's from Kentucky. He's from Louisville.
Yeah.
You drive past the hospital with his name on it when I head down to my family's house down there.
Dude, he used to go to Klan rallies and talk. Fucking love him, man. Fucking love that dude. Who's doing that today? You got all these assholes who stand on one side of the fence and yell at the other side. You accomplish nothing. They're like, yeah, I'm a great person. I went to this rally. I spit at some dude who's racist or something. Like, you accomplished nothing, buddy. Nothing. You made everything worse.
And I think Ali was really a man of his time, where he was independent. He spoke out against what he saw as, and he kept going. Even the thing that I like most. I'm not a huge boxing. I started enjoying boxing more when I got ESPN Plus. When I get Disney and Hulu, I got that package deal, right? You get ESPN Plus. I'm like, I'm gonna watch. And you got all the classic boxing. I started watching it. I'm like, this is great. Why
Yeah,
why
yeah.
haven't I watched boxing?
Right,
I
right.
mean, I've watched some
Yeah,
before, but
yeah.
watching a lot of the older fights, and I think him older with his progress. Was it Parkinson's that he had? He had
Maybe he had yeah, he had some kind of or
he had
MS
a
maybe.
neuro disorder
Yeah, he
that
had
he really,
something. Yeah, yeah.
but he didn't hide it. He
No.
came out, a lot of people get sick, they get something, and they kind of become a
I don't
recluse
think
and
he
they
could
go
help
away.
himself, Joey, be honest with you. I think he was
Oh, that he just
addicted,
had to keep
addicted to
talking.
being out there talking. Yeah.
But he didn't hide it. He kind of he carried a dignity about him, and I
Yeah,
think
he
he's
did. He
one of
did.
those people that is
He
really one
changed
of
the
those
way
American
Americans
icons.
thought about everything, man.
Yeah.
Just everything, yeah.
When you said Muslim, that made me think him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Yeah.
two African American Muslims who were
But
sort
did it
of
in completely different ways though, because
yeah
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wasn't very he was outspoken, but he wasn't kind of the same. He was a little bit more reserved, you know?
yeah yeah. But you have two guys that are in the spotlight,
Yeah.
and you don't think and I think we've become more xenophobic over the past 20
Right.
some years.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it was kind of oh well, Muslim, oh Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a nice guy,
Yeah.
kind of to
Yeah.
deflect some of that, and I think
Yeah.
that was helpful for uh, you know religious type
Yeah.
issues in our country. But
You know, the quote that sticks out for me for Ali when he was asked why he didn't go to Vietnam, and he said, you know, the Viet Cong had never done anything wrong to me, but people here in my own country treat me like crap. And I think that really solidifies everything. Why I think that it changed America, the way
yeah,
people think of war. I mean, we still support our troops mostly. I mean, Vietnam is the one where we didn't support our troops, but I mean, it opened our eyes that, oh, you just don't have to accept this war just because our government said or our president said we're going to war.
I mean,
And I think that's a good thing. I think we should question everything.
yeah, and wasn't the army segregated up until the mid '50s anyway?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
yeah, the rules got changed, but still,
yeah, you
you
have a
know.
you
No,
don't need to go
it's
fight for a country.
integrated. Wink, wink. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I watched something the other day that said, "Oh, well, the Navy was segregated before the Army." Yeah, if you wanted to be a cook
Yeah,
or,
exactly. Yeah,
or do laundry, sure, yeah, it was
sure.
integrated.
Yeah,
Get out of
exactly.
here.
Yeah. All right. So I deferred to you, but technically I still have the control. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip again,
Gotcha.
and I'm gonna stay with heads. Oh, I suck. Flip it one more time, and it's heads again. All right. My go again. The Scopes trails.
The Scopes monkey trial.
Yeah, I do not know that at all. So you're gonna have to go ahead and go with that.
Oh, there's a movie about it. I think it was called Inherit the Wind. It might be.
Okay.
So it was basically sort of, this was the first court case that came down to religion versus science.
Uh-huh.
So you had former Secretary of State and presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan argued that teaching evolution was contrary to the scripture.
Right.
On the other side, you had agnostic, because you couldn't even say atheist back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Clarence Darrow, who was an attorney for the ACLU, who saw this as a chance to roll back influence of religion in education. So Scopes was a science teacher in Tennessee, and he was teaching evolution, which at the time was against the law because it didn't jive with the Bible.
Okay, so what happens to
why,
separation of church and state?
Well, and
isn't
that's
that part of the
exactly
Constitution? Yeah.
right, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
it's always, well, you can be whichever religion you want, as long as it's
Christian.
Christian, as long as it's white people Christianity.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was kind of the first case that really took that on. So it was a fight raging within Christian denominations between modern people and fundamentalists
Mhm.
And this one I took notes on because it has a lot of law stuff in it. But it was Bryant's took the stand to defend fundamentalists, um, and how there was an ongoing struggle to interpret Genesis and how to integrate Christian doctrine and new scientific innovation. The
Okay.
modernists saw no problem with the two and were willing to change Christian doctrine to fill in information about like the Big Bang and all the
Creation.
science, right?
Yeah.
So you got to go, you start looking at the 1800s. There's a fantastic book that was written by Bill Bryson called The History of Nearly Everything.
It's a great title.
It's it's a fantastic title, but it's basically the history of science.
Okay.
And how we started the scientific method and studied science and started inventing equipment so we could go underwater to look at the seafloor, and how we figured out how different types of rocks had settled, and different geography and physics and all these different things. So the heart of the question was not guilt, like Scopes violated the law, so he was guilty. So this was kind of a setup for the ACLU, because it was sort of that, oh, well, you're violating free speech, sort of violating ideas of things. Scopes ended up losing, I think it was like $100 fine or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what that trial was is because you had two people that were very popular. One was a fundamentalist, one was an agnostic. And it was sort of the beginning of the clash between science and religion in America and how things are taught.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It's one of the more fun parts of it. It really reminds me a lot of people now that are like, oh, I read stuff all the time. You can't pray in school anymore. They don't have prayer or they don't say the Pledge of Allegiance
I see those
anymore.
Yeah.
Like, man, I was born in the 70s. We didn't say the pledge when I was a kid that often.
Yeah.
We didn't pray in school then. Like
we didn't pray when I was in school, but I remember doing the Pledge of Allegiance. I would do that. I remember that.
Yeah, we did ours in like elementary school, but by the time I hit
by the time you go to middle school, it's gone. Yeah,
it's all gone.
Yeah.
But I also remember that they had invited, like, if you wanted to have a like a school Bible study, it had to be hosted by a local organization, so you couldn't have you couldn't have any
representatives from the school, right?
But they had people come in from outside that were like, oh yeah, I can hold a Bible study, and it was usually some nice old lady, and they'd bring snacks and stuff. And so you always had the freedom to pray in school. It just can't be organized prayer or whatnot.
Right.
So
I don't remember anyone praying. Yeah, I don't remember anyone praying in my school, but I know the lady who was mean, who was our vice principal, I believe. I think was a former nun or something like that. And she still sort of looked like the part, and she came from the old school where in those Catholic schools where they were like, show me your knuckles. Whack. You know what I mean? Everyone was scared of her, man.
Where did you go
Brooklyn,
to
East New York, Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like one in every class. It was like 2 or 3 Latino guys and everyone else was African American.
Sure.
Yeah. Very poor neighborhood. You know what I mean? Very, very. But what I got from that is I got a lot of exposure to African American history and culture. It was a lot about like Martin Luther King, the slaves. And I talked to a lot of other people who grew up in other places where they didn't get as much as that as I did. I got a lot of that.
I learned the other day that African American history, like Black History Month, actually started out as Black History Week in like the 1920s in South Carolina or in North Carolina.
Right.
And that now people can have their kids withdrawn if they don't want to learn about it.
Kind of like how sex education was. You could
and you're like, what the?
Well, here's the thing with Black history. It's really American history. So you don't want your kids to learn American history. That's what you're saying.
Well, one of the arguments that they use is they cherry pick this quote from Morgan Freeman that talks about how they shouldn't have Black History Month.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're like, oh, well, he said they shouldn't have it. He said, yeah,
He's
you
black.
shouldn't have to have it because it should be integrated into American history, which it isn't. If you actually taught history properly, you wouldn't need Black History Month
Yeah.
because it would be American history and we wouldn't need to have this argument anymore.
You know,
But
I noticed that it kills a lot of people. Even good people, guys that I know, and women. I won't say any names, stuff like that. And they're not racist. They're just trying to process this, understand this. But it kills some people. Like what I mean by kills, I don't mean like it just, oh, I hate it. I mean like trying to understand how popular Black culture is today.
yeah,
And I think if you really studied history more, you'll understand why it is. This country was basically founded on slavery, right? We got cheap labor.
yeah,
You know, they helped build the country. They were so oppressed. They had great music, great food, athleticism, because you know we breeded them basically. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just
you look at Jesse Owens all the way
yeah,
back to, yeah.
yeah. I mean, so yeah, they're going to be influential, man. I mean, there's something about oppression, about struggle. You know, pressure builds makes diamonds. You know what I mean? So if you put all this pressure on people, man, people are going to rise. They're just human nature. We adapt, we overcome. And I think that that's why you see, like when I was a younger man growing up, every almost every every radio station was rock and roll, maybe some country. Definitely not in New York, but mostly rock and roll. So it was basically white people because only white people listen to that.
Sure.
You know, it was very segregated. I used to tell people if I found a Walkman in 1980 something, just by listening to the music, I could tell you the race of the person who owned it. That's
Yeah.
not true anymore.
No.
That is not true anymore. But the culture has taken over. There's pretty much no rock stations whatsoever. R&B and hip hop as completely taken over. Most of the major sports, except for hockey, maybe, has completely been taken over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think some people struggle with that.
I was trying to explain. So for my job, I'm the assistant director of the library and the archivist, and my boss is she's the library director. She's about a year. She's a African American woman, about a year older than me. And the way that I tried to explain to my kids, which like, because it's hard to explain what you do for a living sometimes, especially when you have like a managerial role and they're like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I use the example going back to my high school type. I said, so picture it like LaShawn is Chuck D and I'm Flava Flav. Like I'm her hype man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I do
yeah.
the marketing, I do the support.
Did they get that reference?
They had no idea what I was talking about.
Right.
Like, you get like you haven't heard of Chuck D or Flav? I'm like, what planet are you guys on?
Yeah.
Just don't, they missed it. But you know, that goes back to when I was a kid, when hip hop was probably what? Well, I was a kid
in its
80s
infancy
and 90s.
Yeah.
You know, first album that I bought when I was a kid, like first
Wow.
LP I bought was Michael Jackson Thriller.
Right.
That's the album that everybody bought.
Everybody. Oh my God. You
Yeah,
couldn't keep it on the shelves, man.
Yeah. You saved up your money, you bought that, and then all of a sudden came out like
Prince, so many other people.
Oh yeah, Prince is still. I had to explain the whole thing with Prince with my kids because she was like, how can a 5 foot tall man wearing high heels pick up ladies? And I'm like, because he was Prince. That's how.
Exactly. Listen to this album. You'll understand.
Exactly. But it was, you know, I remember when things came out that were controversial, and they had the whole record label where you had to put the explicit label on.
Yeah.
NWA and all that.
Yeah. 2 Live Crew. Those guys. Jesus. Yeah.
You know what makes you feel old though when you realize that you're about the same age as like you're on the same plane with everybody from like Wu-Tang. Like they're all a little bit older than I am now, but you're like dudes from Wu-Tang are like in their 50s. Like what the hell happened? We got old. That's what happened.
All right, brother. My turn to flip again. Yep. Here we go. Heads again. You got it, Joey. What do you want to do?
let's see. We did Declaration of Independence. We did the
Hmm.
Constitution. We did Ali. You know what? I'm going to go back a little ways, and I want to go to. I think let's do Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, I'm interested in that one.
So I'm a big fan of like the whole idea of exploration,
Yeah.
but then on the other, because it's like adventure. It's the thing that you want to do as a kid, right? You want to go walk around in the woods by the railroad tracks and get shot at by the railroad police for being in there.
All right.
So you always kind of picture yourself as doing that. And I think what we need to remember is, the Louisiana Purchase was owned by Spain for a long time because of Spain conquering the New World. It was then either given or sold to France for whatever reason. And then we bought it dirt cheap because Napoleon was in the middle of basically trying to conquer Europe
Right.
and there was a revolt going on in Haiti at the time, and he just couldn't, he needed money and he needed to get the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, here, guys, just buy this, and just sold this giant, it's a third of our country, and just sold it for pennies on the dollar to fund his war effort. So Thomas Jefferson in 1903 sent Lewis and Clark out, who were both Army officers, to explore and map the new territory and find a path, find a route across.
Right.
We didn't know what was out there. We found the
from
Rocky
sea to shining sea. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of later on the Monroe Doctrine, which was that whole like manifest destiny of we need to keep conquering and exploring.
Jeez, that's a horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Trail of Tears and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up owning the Philippines for a while due to that. Hell, that's how we got Puerto Rico and how we got Cuba and all that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the plans was to establish a presence before Britain or any other European powers can get it. So sort of the whole idea, and it seems fairly benevolent, because the objectives were both scientific and economic. So there was a big portion of it that was really to study the plant life, study the animal life, look at the geography, trade with,
and then conquer it all. No.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what it ended up being. But it was at the time, it was like, hey, let's go check this out.
Yeah, yeah.
And they established trade with local
natives. Yeah.
And you can still somewhere, I didn't look for it, but I know that the Lewis and Clark expedition journals are all online and digitized, so you can look at them all.
Yeah.
So, Napoleon had sold the Louisiana Purchase to us because of, other crap going on.
Yeah.
If you look up, one of the things that I found interesting about it was that they had Indian peace medals made to trade with the natives as sort of a, almost like a business card.
Okay.
But they also took a bunch of technologically advanced items.
Right.
One of them was a 46 caliber repeating air rifle.
Ooh.
That was powerful enough to take down a deer. Clark later on went to be head of the Bureau of Indians, which is now under Department of the Interior. Meriwether Lewis, actually, if you get a chance, you got to read about his death. Some think it's a suicide. Some think it was a murder. He ended up getting shot in the chest twice, but living for a while.
Jeez.
It's a whole bizarre thing, but
yeah.
It was that sort of first, we tend to put a sort of a bow on it and say, look at what we did. We went exploring, not really thinking that we were, probably spreading smallpox and stuff throughout the country.
Yeah. So where do you stand? Do you think that it was, what I'm trying to say is that I think that, going out there, you have to go out there. It's there, right?
Yeah.
Why do you climb the mountain? It's fucking there.
Right.
So we have to go see what's there. But do you think that while they're doing this, these two men or whatever, that they know in their back of their mind that they're probably going to cause a lot of pain and suffering? And I don't mean smallpox. I mean
Sure.
the expansion of our country eventually later, Trail of Tears and all that stuff like that. Or
Right.
is it, or they're just two naive guys who just want to explore?
I think a lot of things start with, I really think that a lot of things do start with the best of intentions and then just later go to shit once money gets involved.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that bothers me, and don't get me wrong, when you read about Christopher Columbus, he was a fucking monster.
Right.
Like he was recalled from the Spanish crown back to Spain because they were like, you're too brutal.
If the Spanish tell you you're too brutal, holy fuck, man.
Yeah, he was too brutal. He was like, you got to tone it down a little bit. But one of the things that I have a lot of trouble wrapping my mind around, at least when it comes to blaming people for the shit they did, was spreading disease and ecological disasters. Like people then didn't know that just dropping a bunch of pigs in Florida would mess up all kinds of stuff.
Right. Or in the Galapagos Islands. Yeah.
We didn't have germ theory.
Right.
So we didn't know that we were going to wipe out
evil spirits.
We didn't know we were going to wipe out an entire race. So I have a lot of trouble, like when people are like, oh, we're just spreading. Well, they didn't have germ theory. They didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it keep like? We have to acknowledge that it happened, but we really can't blame them because they didn't know what the hell was going on. On the other hand, enslaving people and stealing all their crap, we can blame them.
Forcing our religion down their throat. Yeah,
exactly. Burning all their works at the time because they were
heathens, man, savages.
We can fault them for that, but to me, that's one of those moments where we really kind of. We started looking that to me, this is when America started to become a real thing.
Yeah.
And sort of the birth of our modern nation.
Yeah.
Was when we kind of looked and went, oh, look at all this property we have now.
Yeah. That was always going to happen, man. That I think. Okay. So let's change it up a little bit. I'm going to go back a little bit to the Declaration and everything, and you're a historian, dude. So listen, I love the Declaration. I love the founding fathers, the idea of it, but I've always had, maybe because I grew up on the streets, I have a sneaking suspicion it wasn't about liberty so much. It wasn't about freedom. It was about, hey, we could take this shit over and run it. It's like same as drug dealers. Like you're working for a guy and you got these couple of territories that he's selling drugs for. And you notice that this large piece of territory over here on the north side, hey, we could take this over. This guy can't defend it. It's too large. And he's too far away. You understand what I'm saying? I kind of feel like that's a large part of it. But to get people to support it, they go, hey, it's taxing us too much. Hey, don't you want to be free? You know what I mean?
I think there's a big part of it because you have to remember that everybody who would sign that, they were all rich.
They are landowners, businessmen.
It wasn't some dope from Northwest Indiana and some Puerto Rican kid from New York.
Exactly.
Hey, let's make our own country. No. These were the aristocracy of our country.
They were going to increase what they already had by splitting from,
Yes. And there was, I really do think on one end, if you read a lot of the stuff that Jefferson wrote, he was a very brilliant man.
Oh, yeah.
He did really believe in what he was selling. But on the other hand, there was a lot of hey, well, we're already the ruling class. Why are we paying this shit to England when we can keep all this for free?
Yeah. And they can't defend it. There's an ocean between us. You cannot defend this, assholes. So people called, Washington a great army, a great general. All he had to do was sustain. They were going to fold. They can't.
He had to not crap his pants.
Yeah, that's it.
Long enough to
hold it long enough, and they're gonna have to give up. You cannot sustain. Your island is too small. You don't have enough money to keep coming across and fighting. Yep. I mean, it's just no. It was. They were never going to win this. It's just like any kind of occupation, like Vietnam, like Afghanistan, like Iraq. Those people know they don't have to beat America. You can't beat America. all you have to do is outlast them.
Yep. You have to beat us logistically.
Yes.
You have to keep us from getting guns or bullets and food over and well, so you're in Korea right now, right?
Yeah.
So how long does it take you to get to Korea? Like
From what do you mean, like flying from the States to Korea, or what do you mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean to get everything to pack up everything and
Oh
then to
fuck
get
yeah! Oh
clothing,
Jesus
find
Christ!
it.
Yeah. And back
Yeah.
then, they were on boats, all steam
Yeah.
ships,
Yeah.
probably 20 knots, maybe the most. Not even
Yeah.
that, probably.
You were on sailing ships in the
Yeah.
Revolutionary War. It'd take you a month to get here with everything you need.
With all the
Half-
disease, people dying because that shit would kill
Yeah.
people on the fucking way. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you bitch when you get bumped out of your flight. You're like, ah, Christ, I got to lay over in Honolulu.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then you've been stuck on a ship for a month or more. So your body's not ready to fight a war. You know what I mean? You're in a land that you know nothing about. This is these people's home. It was
Well, I don't know if you've ever been to the UK, but it's very
Yeah.
nice. It's very temperate. It's very pleasant.
Yeah.
And then you come to America, and like right now outside, it's 7 degrees out where I live.
Fuck.
In the summer, it'll be about 105 with mosquitoes the size of house cats. Like, this is not a nice place to live.
Yeah. All right, Joey, it's your turn. Call it. Heads or tails?
Let's do heads.
You win.
I got it?
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, fantastic. You know
We
what?
got
I'm
four
going to
more.
talk about. I'm sorry?
We have four more. Four more to
Yep.
go. We have electricity and baseball on my side. On your side, what do we have here? Federal aid and the Highway Act.
Yep.
And then civil rights. Yeah.
Yep. You know what? I'm going to jump to the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. I think this
That's
is
more
one
recent
of the
times. That's yeah.
Oh yeah, I think this is one of the most important things that our country went through post-war. So pre-World War II, well, one of the reasons I like this is because I grew up in Northwest Indiana, where we have steel mills, refineries, all the shipping depended on Lake Michigan to get things places. Our highway system in this country absolutely sucked at the time.
Right.
So if you look at the signs, you can tell the white signs are U.S. highways. The federal highway system are the red or the red and blue signs. Those are all built after the 1950s or during the 1950s up until today. Basically, Eisenhower saw the Autobahn in Germany and was like, why don't we have this in our country? Our roads suck. And built the highway system. And let's see, it authorized the construction of 41,000 miles of interstate highways. It allocated $26 billion to pay for them. Wow. So basically what would happen is the state would pay 10%, the federal government would give another 90% of that money.
Wow.
And it completely changed the face of our country.
Definitely.
I've like I've said before, I've only been to the airports in New York, but I'm familiar with other cities. And if you drive through Chicago, you've got just roads that run, 30 feet from the front door of a Catholic church. You got you got buildings on either side of the highway.
Yeah.
All across the country, it's like that.
Listen, in your adult age, have you ever spent a few days without a car and try to get around? Like, don't take a bus, don't take a train. Can you imagine how limited your life was?
Oh yeah.
Just to get to the next town was a big ordeal.
And that's exactly it. When we were in London, my wife and I and the kids went to London like 2 years ago. You get a bus pass. You can get on the bus. You can get on the train. You can get on a ferry boat. You can get in the tube. Like, you can get anywhere you need in this country.
Take a boat, take a plane.
Yeah, I can't get to I can't get to Walmart without a car.
Yeah,
like I live in a subdivision. Right behind me is literally a cornfield. Like, it's Indiana. This is what we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, anything. I think the other day when I looked, I'm 2.5 miles. Well, I'm 1 mile from the main road.
Uh-huh.
And then 2-3 miles from the local Target,
It's
whatever.
crazy, man.
But it's all highway. So you can't go
Yeah.
walk down that crap when I've got like 14 inches of snow on the ground like we do now.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're just stuck.
That's a good one, man. That really changed things, man.
Yeah. So it basically what it did was it wanted to safely connect major cities,
Yes. For commerce.
decrease congestion around major cities.
Right.
Like, so if you've heard of Route 66, it starts at Times Square and it runs to
What's left of it.
Yeah. But it was this road that just sort of meandered through every little small town.
Yeah.
Improve the economy because congestion, bad roads.
Yeah.
You couldn't move goods around.
And united the people of the country too, because now you can go around a lot easier to within other different states and stuff. Yeah.
Right. And it allowed us to have the ability to move. One of the reasons it was built was to transport military units and supplies and evacuate cities in case of emergency.
Yes, yes.
There used to be a thing where you had to have so much area between bridges so you can land military planes on the highway if you needed to.
Yeah.
However, to me, the downfalls of the system sort of are more interesting than the upside of it.
Okay, share something real quick before we move on to something else.
It created what's called the homogenization of America. So you're like,
I can see that. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Urban sprawl. It created the suburbs. People move out of the city. Then we become a driving culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sort of build small town America because you can just move in closer or you can move out further. And you have basically a city like mine that was set up to be a bedroom community for Chicago. People move out of Chicago, they move off the farm, settle in here, and it sort of made America kind of generic.
Yeah, cookie cutter type of thing. Yeah. Sure. I want to add something to that, sort of related. I used to go to the pools here in the city, and New York City has these fantastic. I mean, they're huge, they're like a city block, and I thought that was normal. Apparently, it's not. And it's something that happened, I believe, in the 1930s, which, that decade is like a weird decade in our history.
Yeah.
It's famously known as being the decade where no president was ever born. But there's other things, and I forgot what they call it. It was the Act of something Work Act or something like that. But they built like 11, 12 just gigantic pools in the city. And these things are like works of art, especially for their time. Like they were just so far. It's the first time pools recycled the water, cleaned itself, and
sure,
you know what I mean? Irrigation or whatever you call that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you? Do they have those in Chicago? Or at least not at this scale. I mean, I'm sure they have them in other places.
You know what? A lot of places, like where we still have an opera house that was built then. A lot of YMCA's. Actually, one of the
is this part of the New Deal? This is part of
yes.
Roosevelt.
Actually, I'm working on a book right now.
Nice.
That's actually about the WPA.
That's what it is. WPA. You son of a bitch.
Well, I'm actually working on the art.
What does that stand for? What does it stand for? Work? Is it work or?
Yeah.
Program?
So something.
Right.
I'm working on another part, which was actually post office art.
Okay.
So, because artists were also out of work, they said, "Hey, we should start making public art." Where do most people go? That's a public building. Post offices.
Yeah, back then.
So they started putting these giant murals in post offices all over the country. And I'm actually working on a book right now about public art in Texas post offices. So here's a photo of one of them that was out there. So yeah, so it was I think there were about 70 or 80 of these. But yeah, those public works things, they were huge. They were one of the things when
This is basically, correct me if I'm wrong, something that we came up with to sort of combat the depression, right?
Yes.
The stock markets and everything went bad in the 20s.
Right. You had the Conservation Corps that,
people digging ditches
and built up the national park system.
Yeah.
So that was sort of one of those things. So yeah, you have these big public works things in the 30s and 40s. We have a beautiful pool up in Whiting, Indiana, right
Yeah.
up by a steel mill. But a lot of those places still exist. But I'm glad to hear New York had some nice public pools, though.
I mean, amazing, man. And
Yeah.
the crown jewel is, from what I understand, is Astoria. I mean, Astoria, Astoria is a nice place in Queens. It was Greek. It's considered like, you got like Little Italy,
Yeah. Yeah.
Chinatown. This was the
Yeah. Yeah.
Greek area,
Okay.
and it's in a park, right? Park kind of slopes up on a hill, so it's on the bottom part of the hill. So if you're up on the street, you're walking, you look down into the park, kind of slopes down, and there's two major bridges. So the pool is right next to the river. There's two gigantic bridges on either side of the pool, and looking across the water is like the skyline of Manhattan.
Wow.
So you see these like boats traveling through the river. I think it's the Hudson or maybe the East River. My geography is bad. These two
Yeah.
beautiful bridges. You're in a park, so it's green, and the pool. I mean, go look it up, man. Google, Astoria pool, Astoria Queens pool. It's beautiful, man. It's huge, and it has like these big stadium steps that go up, where people can kind of like put their blankets and kind of picnic and stuff like that. And then you go down, and there's the pool. And here's the thing that I love, but it's gone away because we're too safe. All the playgrounds have padding, and
Right.
you can't break your leg, you can't get a boo-boo. We used to have a gigantic 16-foot deep pool, and the high dive, crazy sons of bitches used to jump off that thing, but so many people used to sneak in and drown and die.
Yeah.
They closed it all up. I think they plant flowers in it or something like that now. But I was young enough that I remember seeing these crazy sons of bitches going up there and
Sure.
jumping. People would get hurt all the time because you have to know how to high dive. Diving off a small one is easy, and I cracked myself on a small one. Imagine being like 10 feet, 20 feet up high and jumping.
I swam in high school, and I also did some diving in high school. I was never very good at it.
That's so hard.
But when you make a mistake on that high board, oof.
Yeah.
That is not comfortable.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. It was a beautiful thing that we had such a thing. And if you look at the history about it, when they first opened it, they have pictures, man, you can find online. They opened it at night and they lit up everything. That's another thing. They had lights on the water, and it is so beautiful. And you see people dressed in that old sort of 1930s tie and hat, and it's beautiful. It's such a great piece of Americana, man. I just love it. All right, brother, your turn again.
Okay.
We have 3 more things to go through, I think.
Yep. Yeah. I'm gonna go with I'll go with Tails this time. I had a little more luck with that.
Yeah. And Tails, you got it.
Oh, fantastic. Let's talk about we'll talk about one of your topics this time. Let's talk about baseball a little bit.
Baseball, why not? Right? America's pastime.
I gotta tell you.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, this is one of those things that really, because of the pandemic, that I have truly, this actually hurt me the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Because of not being able to go to watch baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're of that generation where it was the sport. Before social media, before cable got big, I would every morning run down before going to school. I would run down to the local bodega, and they used to have the newspapers out front. I never bought a newspaper, but I would turn to the sports to see who won, the box scores.
Yep.
This is the reason why I put baseball in there is not because of the beauty of playing the game. What I put it in there is because how it united the country. Everybody followed baseball. And in a time where it was hard to follow things.
Sure.
It's not as easy as it is today. And one of the issues I have with all this fun technology, the Netflix and all the stuff like that, is that we have less things that unite us and more things that divide us. It used to be where I was a kid, everyone watched the same TV show. And we would come in, or the same cartoon, and we would all talk about, we had these things that we had in common. And baseball was just one of those things that lasted for about a good 100 years.
Yeah.
And having that sort of unity, we could be of different religion, of different political beliefs or whatever, but we had that we could talk baseball. And because we could talk baseball, maybe we could build something important together. That was sort of the bridge to more things. I feel like America's really, really split up more than just red and blue. You know what I mean?
Right.
And part of the greatness of America is that we had that. And I think a lot of the stuff, we got a lot more that we can't, there's no way to quantify it, is what I'm saying. But because we had baseball, I think that, you know, it united the people, and we got a lot more done because we had. There was sort of a building block, if I'm making any sense here.
And I think we've become much more of an NFL society, and I think the NFL is much more. They're all money based, but I think the NFL is so much more blatantly marketing and money wise. Although I do have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You being a New Yorker and me being from the Chicagoland area, we were lucky enough to have two teams in our hometown.
Yeah.
One that you loved and one that you hated.
Right.
How did that work out for you?
And I never hated anything. And I grew up in my parents, my father's side loved baseball. So they grew up in Brooklyn. My grandmother was a diehard Brooklyn fan. Broke her heart when they left. And then that's when they had three teams. And all three of those teams were great. They were like in the World Series and stuff all the time. So the way I remember is that my grandma was a Brooklyn fan. My father's two brothers were Giants fans, I believe. And he became a Yankee fan.
Uh-huh.
And then I became a Mets fan because I grew up in the 80s and they were like the team.
Sure.
You know? But I had a fun rivalry. I never hated any of the other teams, whether it's the Jets or whatever. I had the one that I rooted for the most, but I didn't hate. To me, it's like, if New York wins, that's good. You know what I mean? Some people get so serious about it and want to like kill people. I'm like, dude, it's not that serious, man.
We have one of the issues that we have in this area was when the Cubs were purchased by the Chicago Tribune Company, who also owned WGN, that was a super station. Mm-hmm. It was broadcasted nationwide. So you had all these areas that had access to Cubs games and all that stuff. Whereas if you were a Sox fan, you really only had the local channel. They were the small market team.
Yeah, okay.
So there was a lot of rivalry with that. I've been to numerous, like when I was a kid, one of the best places to go was to the old Comiskey Park for birthday parties. They had a whole like picnic bench section. It was like $4 a kid. You go in, you watch a game.
It was very blue collar now. I feel like no sports are blue collar. They're very corporate now. Every sport.
Yeah. My wife and I have been lifelong Cubs fans. Both. We got our World Series, which will probably be the one that we get. I don't see it happening again.
But you got one.
We got one. But we also, because we're so close to Milwaukee, we do like to go to Brewers games at least once.
That's a nice stadium too. Yeah, I've been there.
It's a beautiful stadium. I think the one time we went, for the four of us to go for tickets, it was $16.
Wow.
So we took the weekend. We went up. We did a tour of Miller. We went to the Miller Park. We got some bratwurst after. We picked up some cheese on the way out of Wisconsin. We were good. It's one of those things that like we all like doing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thing that was sad. It's a perfect excuse to sit outside and drink beer, and everybody has a good time.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, man, being at Great Lakes, being an EMA school.
Yes.
So I remember what we would do, and I went back a few times for C schools too. But I remember what we would do, being like kind of right in the middle between Milwaukee to the north and Chicago to the south, was when they had that weekend came, and it was a paycheck weekend. Well, you went down to Chicago, you had money. But the next weekend when you were broke, you went up to Milwaukee because everything was dirt cheap.
Yeah. And if you were really broke and you could only afford to get on the whatever, I can't remember what train it was, but you can only make it as far as Kenosha. And we were like, well, Kenosha is good enough. It's got some local dive bars.
Yeah. Or right outside, they had that little bar or something right outside. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, there were 2 or 3 of them out there.
But they were kind of dangerous too, though.
Yeah, I remember, man, I went with one guy one time and he was like, oh, let's go find some crack. And I'm like, all right, bro, I'll see you later. I went back to the barracks. I'm like, look, I'm fine with throwing up in an alley and maybe getting and maybe getting arrested, but
Yeah.
no,
Crack.
that's
That's the
it.
major leagues, man.
Yeah, he ended up getting the boot soon thereafter. So apparently,
Strange. He got the boot. That's strange.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's one of those oddities where if you got kicked out for something that dumb, thank
Yeah.
you for
Yeah.
yeah,
You're in the
yeah,
wrong place. Yeah. So I want to add something because you're talking about the World Series in Chicago. Yeah, the poor Cubbies. They went the longest than anyone without a World Series.
and they deserved it.
But what I remember, though, and this was a touching moment for me. I don't know if it was for you, because the White Sox actually won a few years before you guys did. And
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
watching that final game in the last inning, the last out, and the newscast span through the crowd. All these famous Chicago Cub fans, Bill Murray, all these other people that traditionally were Cubs fans were there supporting
sure.
it because they felt like
Yep.
this is as close as I'm ever going to get. You go White Sox, you do it, and I love that. I thought that was a very touching
Yeah,
that they were
yeah,
all there supporting Chicago. You know what I
yes.
mean? That was a
Oh
great
yeah,
thing.
I've gone to numerous Sox games in my life. My brother-in-law will get tickets once in a while, and he has no interest. And he's like, "Hey, you guys want tickets to go see the Sox?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." You get good part that, and that's the thing. Wrigley Field is actually in
In the middle of the
the
city,
city.
it's hard. Yeah,
There's no parking. There's no. We usually park up at Loyola. My wife's a
yeah. Take
Loyola.
a train in or something. Yeah,
Take the train down. Well, I can't remember what the name of it is now. Comiskey Park. You park. You walk in. They've got the guy that walks around with the backpack full of frozen margaritas.
yeah, yeah,
All you need to know. It's going to be a good evening.
yeah. All right, the coin toss is yours. You ready, Joe?
Yeah,
Call it.
let's do tails again.
Nope, it's me.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'm gonna go with mine. Let's finish up. My last one
Yeah.
is electricity. Electricity. Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity. No. So the reason why I put electricity, look at the world we're living in today. What do we have? What do we do? Does not revolve around electricity in somehow, in some way. And Ben Franklin, one of our guys, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, that is related to it. So even though it took a long time for it to get to the point where we are today, it happened. I mean, there's debates whether he discovered electricity and stuff like that. But when I grew up in a kid, it was, hey, Ben Franklin discovered electricity. I know there's a
Yeah.
debate about all
Yeah.
that stuff like that, but we're gonna go with that. Yeah, I mean, what other discovery more impactful for today's world? Maybe not immediately. It was like, hey, great, this guy discovered electricity. What the fuck are we gonna do with it?
Right. Right.
No, it
Yeah.
took years, but look at us today. If we knocked out electricity, holy shit, we're fucked.
Yeah. Oh, it goes right down to I remember watching somebody and their statement was we wouldn't go back to the Stone Ages if society were wiped out. We would go back to steam power
Right,
because it's our nearest close thing.
right.
And the scary part is they don't know if we actually have enough resources to restart electricity to basically go through the period we went through to generate electricity
Holy
again.
shit, really? That's crazy.
Yeah, we would have to start basically with solar,
Wind, solar,
wind,
yeah.
because we've burned up a lot of the dino juice and a lot of the coal that
Shit.
got the ball rolling. So yeah,
Wow.
I always like to think about, my kids, they're fascinated by payphones.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, that's what
What
you
is that?
had.
A phone booth? What is that?
Yeah, yeah. And my kids would usually in February, usually around this time of the year, we'd go to the Chicago Auto Show and then go to Greektown for dinner for Valentine's Day. And you walk through McCormick Place and they got the whole row of payphones where everybody go out and call. My kids are always like, look at all those payphones, because they're all still there.
Dude,
Nobody's
whenever I
using
see one, I damn near break my cell phone. I'll take a picture. I'm like, look at that.
it. Yeah. But I mean, we had lost power. We had a big ice storm about 2 months ago, and we lost power for like 30 some hours, which sucks. Um, It was over a weekend, so it wasn't that bad.
Right.
But you realize how dependent you are. Oh, you want to
Yeah.
call the utility company? Let me go out to my car, plug into the charger.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything is.
You ever see that there was a TV show based on that? I forgot what it was called, but that we unleashed some sort of technology and it nothing electrical could work anymore. I don't know if you heard about that. It was
Yes.
called Evolution, I think, or something like that. It was
Yeah.
just interesting idea.
It's scary. It's
Yeah.
scary to think of a world without electricity. It's scary how dependent we are on one thing that we're not sure how we're going to continue generating it
Yeah.
in the future.
Well, from what I understand, I think solar flares or something like that could knock a lot of the shit that we have out.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And just like a magnetic pulse or something, then all your shit is fried. And what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's a scary proposition. And I know I get laughed at by some of the younger people in my field. But I still keep copies of everything,
As you should.
all of our
Hard
indexes
copy. Yeah.
on paper. And they're like, "Oh, don't you have the database?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I
Yeah.
keep everything listed in a printed out Word document or
Yeah.
printed out PDF or whatever, because I'm like,
As far as I know about that stuff, like solar flares and knocking out stuff, it's not a question of if it's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Like
sure,
that shit's going to happen. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It could be tomorrow. It could be 1,000 years from now. It
Yeah.
will happen.
Yeah.
And that's a fear to have. And it's, as a former electrician, it's
Right.
I still think about some of the guys that working in the engine room, and they thought, the electricity was like magic. Like, no, guys, it's basically just plumbing with electrons, and
Yeah.
it just never occurred to them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But
a good
yeah,
way to think about it. Current flow of water. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like plumbing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are intimidated by it. I mean, you
What
should be.
it made me think of something though. Like I grew up, my maybe because my family come from Puerto Rico, which is a island that's been ravaged throughout history, but
Right.
they always prepared. They would always have
Sure.
generators, gas, water, dry foods, and we don't do that anymore. And I
No.
talked to a guy when I got out of the Navy. So this was by maybe like 12 years ago. You go through those TAP classes and they prepare you to be a civilian. And he was an economist. And this was around the time anyway, he was talking about like the Great Recession and stuff like that. He said, what made the Great Recession so different is that before, people used to save. They used to have a cushion, something to fall back on. When this recession people had debt because we changed our whole system and we're a debt-based system. You know what I mean?
Look at the giant toilet paper scare that happened.
Oh, geez.
After once COVID came.
Yeah.
Like, thank God I got 2 daughters because we had a full stock of toilet paper.
Yeah.
But people were just losing their damn minds for it.
It's crazy.
So,
all right, brother, we got one more thing because we gotta wrap it up. Go ahead and knock out your last thing.
So I picked for my last one the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was started by John F. Kennedy. The Senate voted 73 to 27 in favor of the bill, and LBJ signed the bill into law on July 2nd of 1964. And he said it's an important gain, but I think we just delivered the South to the Republican Party for a long time to come.
Yeah.
That goes back to the last election where the Republicans were more like the Democrats. This is that flip that happened. Mm-hmm. Segregation on the grounds of race, religion, national origin was banned in all places. Later came, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act barred race, religion, national origin. Created the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Right.
It forbade federal funds from discriminatory programs authorized by the Department of Education. So we segregated the schools. Martin Luther King called it the second emancipation because it really was, because the first one didn't work because of the election of
Right.
1876. The Civil Rights Act was later expanded to bring disabled Americans, elderly, and women into collegiate athletics under its umbrella.
Wow.
So that was one of the things that you don't think about when you think of civil rights. You think of minorities. You don't tend to think about women or disabled or religious minorities, things like that. Two of the things that really gave the Civil Rights Act teeth was what came after, which was the Voting Rights Act of 65, which prohibited literacy tests and other discriminatory voting practices that were engaged in. And then the Fair Housing Act of 1968 banned discrimination on sale, rental, or financing of property due to race or religion, whatever. So even though we've had all of these things come through, we still have seemingly systemic racism that's still a problem in our country, which shows that even though you pass a law 50 years ago, it takes time for things to and now it expands into the LGBTQ community and other groups that have been traditionally discriminated against getting their footing, and hopefully when you look at it, you hope, well, I hope we don't have to enforce any of this anymore, because you hope it eventually goes away. But unfortunately, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. Here's the $100,000 question. Did that get him killed?
The whole Kennedy thing is the oddity of, I don't know. There's a lot of strangeness.
Yeah, there is so much.
The thing that gets me is that LBJ at the time, when you look at him, at the time, it was, when he left office, it was very much on the, not only signing the Civil Rights Act that he kind of got punished for, but really it was the involvement in Vietnam, which goes back to Ali, sort of escalating Vietnam and the draft and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And now when people look at it, I think Vietnam takes a back seat to his actions with the civil rights.
I think you're right.
Which it should. That's one of the things that kind of irritates me, is when people talk about how, well, you only get deployed or whatever under Republicans, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure under Clinton. It wasn't a big deployment, but I'm pretty sure I went twice under Clinton. So don't peddle your nonsense.
No, the big one here is that I remember, it's been since I was in the Navy, and now it continues in the Army, which is like, you only get pay increases under Republicans. Like, no, my pay, we always, at the end of the year, the new chart comes out and it's always an increase. Can you imagine a guy not increasing? You won't get voted in, dude. Not increasing the military pay. Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
You got to get at least your 2%. If you're not getting 2%, you're losing money, and forget that. That's bad on both ends of politics for that. But to me, I think ending with the Civil Rights Act is kind of the where we were, where we came from, and where we should be. We should consider as a nation our equality, and that we are not a country just built for rich old white guys like it started with, but we are, we need to be more, basically the most rights for the most people is what we should be striving for. And I think that was a huge leap forward to what we had for almost 100 years. But the leftovers of that systemic racism is what leads to things like the BLM protests, all that happened all summer long, and continued issues with race, sex, creed. We had the Muslim ban a couple of years ago. It's just nonsensical. Yeah.
All right, Joey, let's end it there, brother.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Not a problem. We'll